What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Welcome to Texas Podcast. Thank you for all the new subscribers, all the comments, all the likes. Thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated. On this one, on this episode, we're gonna go back to the Roderick Keith, excuse me, the Roderick Keith Johnson, also known as Coco. Uh, First, let me see. This is update on the Coco. You know what I mean? I got updates on the other stories, but let me see. Okay, as you can see, it says it says thank you for reaching out. To be honest, I was surprised when I saw the message from you. It is good to know that my story is still inspiring and reaching people. I am interested in speaking with you more about my story and can't thank you enough for considering me for your podcast. I would love to further discuss with you more about whatever it is you have in mind to accomplish, and I would be honored to continue corresponding with you in the meantime until we can set up a time for us to talk in the near future. Thank you again for all your time and consideration, and I look forward to hearing back from you again soon. By the way, how did you cross paths with my Aunt Loretta? Uh, I am glad that she was able to assist you. Sincerely, Roderick Keith Johnson. Uh, I just wanted to share that with y'all real quick. And he got some real interesting story. Very, very it's very interesting. You know, Last time I did a part one, uh, I'm about to do part two on it, and I'm gonna see where I left off at. Uh, oh yeah, I was right here. Okay, he got a very interesting story. As we're gonna read the documentation, and plus whatever other stories he has from Texas prisons. And he's gonna bring it from I guess a different point of perspective. He's not gonna be bringing it from like a gang member's perspective of you, or you know he's gonna come at it. He's gonna give you the real honest raw deal of prison environment. He's not gonna hold nothing back. He's gonna tell it how it is. You know what I mean? It is what it is. Prison is not a fun place to be for anybody. You know, I did very short time. He's gonna bring a whole completely insight of the Texas prison, and he was also in New Mexico. He's gonna bring the so he was at New Mexico because he got transferred after he filed this civil suit. He got rearrested, and I think he got shipped off to New Mexico, and then he got brought back because he was engaging supposedly over there in those activities. So he has a very very interesting story. He's gonna be you know talking about Texas prisons. Like I said before, I didn't do too much time in Texas prisons. You know, this guy done. You know, I guess you can see he's seen the bad end stick of the prison. If he was getting sold off for $5-10 worth of commissary or cash or cigarettes or whatever he was getting sold off for. Here in the documentation, we're gonna read a little bit more on what he was being sold, or who was it. You know, uh, I'm gonna give you my opinion, and once again, all my stories that I try to find, that intrigue me, and I'm pretty sure what other people will find interesting, it's all public knowledge. And then if I do find that story, I always try to find that person, you know, let them tell that story. If I find it interesting, I'm pretty sure somebody else would find it interesting, because it's always better to hear it from the horse's mouth. You know, uh, And once again, I'm not a perfect storyteller. You know, I guess I don't know how to spice it up or embellish stuff more than what it is. You know, so I'm not that good of a storyteller. I can't make you suspenseful or I just call it the way it is. And I apologize. Hopefully, the more stories I read, the better I'll get. Because reading was my strong point. So, but at the same time, you know, sometimes I don't be feeling doing this type of stuff. Sometimes I'm laying down, and sometimes I don't feel like doing it. But it's almost like it's therapeutical for me. It helps me out. It's for fun. Uh, People come on here, and they throw their threats out there, knowing that they have a violent history, and those are considered terroristic threats. You can't be threatening people online and saying you want to see blood, and the content of those messages can be taken wrong. You having that person having a violent criminal history, uh, you know, the authorities, tend to look into those type of cases, especially if you just continue reporting. Eventually, they'll come and be like, okay, what's going on? As long as they see some kind of consistency, uh, evidence. So my job is just keep on reporting it and uploading the videos and let the authorities figure it out. I also have a legal aid that's helping me out, but that's all totally different. Uh, so on the Keith, you know, I think I left off right here at the 57. Gang activity was rampant in Building 7. Inmates who were young, handicapped, homosexual, or perceived as weak were quickly preyed upon by gang members. On information and belief, defendants were aware of the situation. So he's saying that, you know, the committee, higher rank, the guards, from the guard that was there all the way to the major captain, uh, knew what was going on to him. So Marty Smith, who was transferred to Building 7 shortly after Mr. Johnson's transfer to Building 7, so he transferred himself over there. Once Coco was over there, Marty Smith, the blood, I think he's the blood or the Crip. I can't. I have to go back, but I think he might be the blood because the first one was the gangster disciples, and then the Crips jumped them under the stairwells, and then the Bloods. I think Marty Smith is the one. He bought him, so immediately he reasserted ownership of Mr. Johnson, forcibly hiring him out to other gang members as a sexual slave. So he was a sexual slave. He was out there forced and. But I don't know. You know what I mean? Because it's the more you read into it, it's like this is like the fourth grievance that he's filed. Like the fourth complaint asking for safekeeping, and he's been ignored because on February 25, 2001, Mr. Johnson filed the step one grievance requesting safekeeping status. He received no reply. So he put another grievance in asking requesting for safekeeping, letting them know, hey, once again, I'm being sold over here at Building 7. So I mean, he's been moved from Building 11, 9, 8, 7. If I'm right, I think this is like his seventh block that his fourth block that he's been moved on to, and he's reporting the same abuse. He's filing grievances, He still hasn't get no reply. So a month later, on March, uh, Mr. Johnson received an anonymous letter or kite from another inmate telling him that he would be unalived once the unit was off lockdown because he was a snitch. So somebody sent him a kite because I guess they received the grievances a month prior requesting for safekeeping. So a day later, on March 16th, a day later after he received the kite saying, they were going to unalive him for being a snitch, he goes to a classification committee meeting. Yeah, it's for his fourth endangerment hearing. So this is his fourth one. That this grievance was his fourth one. Because I was adding them up, and I'm like, man, that's four times that he's gone up there and complained. And they've have physical evidence. He's bruised up, but I don't think they ever did like any kit on him because he said that those weren't considered emergency or drastic enough. And also, maybe he played a part because his characteristics were that of somebody that probably liked that type of stuff. You know, I don't know. That's more for Keith or you know to explain a little bit more. So he was at the committee, uh, the higher ranks told him, bring bruises or stay out of my face. He told him, hey, you come in here, you better next time you come in here, you better come in here bruised up, or you better come in here bloody for me to believe your cries. So again, on March 18th, 2001, he fired another a fifth grievance, asking for safekeeping and you know, he's being sexually assaulted and harassed. On April 9th, 2001, received reply to his previous grievance with stock language stating that the committee had reviewed this case March 16th, 2001, and denied his request for transfer safekeeping or protected custody due to insufficient evidence. So, he keeps on telling them, but there was no evidence. I guess there was no physical evidence, no bruising, no, it was just his word. I guess, I don't know how common it is of people going in there and saying, "Hey, this is getting done to me." I don't know what the benefits of that is. If it is just to get moved from block to block to block to block, or I don't I don't get his motives of why he would be putting up all these grievances if the stuff really wasn't happening to him. You know, because he's basically just snitching on people. If none of that stuff's happening, he's basically snitching on a lot of organizations. You know, black and Hispanic. So he's put in this jacket of not only being a homosexual, but being a snitch. So I don't understand why he would be put in that jacket of a snitch if uh, none of this stuff was happening. He was already perceived, and his characteristics, his mannerisms were that of a homosexual. So uh, I don't get that. I'm kind of confused on that right there. So on April 17th, 2001, he filed a detailed grievance he had made to seek protection from, the raping and the sexual assaulting. He provided prison officials with the name of an inmate, Marty Smith. So Marty Smith is the blood. He's the he finally told him. I guess before when he was filing them grievances, he wasn't giving a name. He was just saying, "Hey, this stuff is happening." So I guess when he was going up to the committee, they need to know who, if this is so called happening to you, who's doing it. Now, if you don't give them a name, it's like anywhere else. They're not gonna take you seriously. They're gonna. You can't go crying wolf. So this time he actually gave them a name of Marty Smith, which is that blood. So let's see what they do. So on May 4th, 2001, uh, Johnson received a reply to the Step 2 grievance, indicating in the same stock language. And once again, they investigated, and there was not enough evidence to support his claim of life endangerment. Throughout this period, Johnson was routinely forced to endure sexual assault and raping by multiple gang members. He became increasingly hopeless and wanted to, unalive himself at times. At the end of July 2001, Mr. Johnson went before the committee for another reclassification. He was assigned a job at a unit supply clerk and moved into a dormitory in Building 18. So they gave him a supply clerk, I guess, like maybe at a factory. I worked at the soap factory for a little time making soaps and the toothpaste, the powder toothpaste that they would hand out to the indigent people, uh, the blue soaps. Uh, they would make all kinds of stuff there. It was basically the chemical unit. I would run a machine, and all it would do was just make little blue soaps all day, and I would just have to box them up and weigh them out. I guess that was my first experience as a warehouse worker, working in that soap factory at the and they closed that unit at the central unit. Where it was one of the Texas oldest prisons. Gang member Marty Smith, uh, taking advantage of the lax security of the outlet, frequently left his own building and came to building 18 to harass, threaten, and abuse Johnson. So this guy, he will go, you know. So he was going out of place, going from building to building, harassing old Johnson. In late July 2001, Johnson again reported the threats and assaults to Sergeant Matthews. Sergeant Matthews filed a life endangerment on behalf of Johnson. It says in early 2000 of August, Mr. Johnson appeared before the classification committee for his fifth endangerment claim. So he's appearing at his fifth, you know, life endangerment classification meeting. And it says was composed of and 4 and 5 defendants told Mr. Johnson that Building 18 was entirely safe on information and believed defendants were all aware that this was untrue. The defendants denied him safekeeping once again. So they denied him again. Once again, they denied him, you know, the fifth time, even after he gave him a name. Soon after, Johnson was transferred to Building 18. The Tangos gang in Unit 18 targeted him for sexual advances. A Tangos gang member named Eric began threatening Mr. Johnson with the violence unless he submitted to sexual behaviors. You know, this Tangos right here, there's a lot of them. It's not, and the way, earlier they put a one organization up here from the last video, the double M, and if I would be a guessing man, I think this would be the Sananto Tango. that was doing this type of stuff. The Crips and the Mandingo Warriors also began demanding sex for Mr. Johnson. Because you see, the Crips are just uh, a street gang. The Mandingo Warriors are a security threat group. You know, they're organized. There's a bylaws. You know, basically blood in, blood out. You know, they got different structure than the Crips. You know, TDC sees these guys more of as organized, but you know, I didn't see that many. I seen like one or two, but they were older guys. And the reason you could tell you could tell they were Mandingo warriors because they had a Zulu a Zulu patch on their arm or on their they had a shield, and that's how you can tell they were Mandingo warriors. But they were old school cats. Started in August 2001 and continuing for 5 months to December 2001. The Tongos gang raped and prostituted Johnson. Only Tongo gang members were allowed to use Mr. Johnson's body during this time. God, you know what I mean? Like, because they're not saying, Tongos just means hometown. You know, it could have been San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, uh, El Paso. Uh, it's he's not being specific. It's just saying Tongos, and it says they were the only ones that that could use his body at this time. During this period, Johnson fell into deep despair, hopelessness, and he frequently considered unaliving himself at times. In December 2001, uh, the Tongo gang ordered Mr. Johnson to perform oral on an inmate in 18 dorm. Sergeant Bennett found Mr. Johnson in the inmate's room and issued a disciplinary report against Mr. Johnson for being in another inmate's dormitory without authorization. As a result, Mr. Johnson lost recreation and commissary for 45 days. So this dude was out of place in another dorm, you know, giving guy fellatio. I'm gonna ask him, what gangs were this? You know what I mean? Because shit, it's like I want to know which tangos it was. He lost recreation and commissary for 45 days. On December 2001, Mr. Johnson filed another steep one grievance requesting safekeeping and protection from sexual deviancy. He informed staff that the disciplinary violation on December 2 was the restart of forced activity by the gangs. So he's saying that at the out of place and that homosexual activity was because he was being forced upon. They told him, "Hey, go do that, or we're gonna do harm to you." On December 5th and December 30th, 2001, desperate for help, Mr. Johnson wrote letters to the senior warden pleading for protection. Johnson received no response to any of his letters. He also wrote to the director, executive director, and chairman of the committee, pleading for safekeeping. December 13th, 2001, he went again for his sixth life endangerment claim. I mean, that's his sixth one. Going in there saying, "Hey, man, can y'all please put me in PC, man? I'm tired of being a boy. I'm tired of getting turned out." But it says prior to the hearing, an inmate named Gilstrap a member of the Mandingo Warriors gang forced Mr. Johnson to put makeup on his face to attend the hearing. Yeah, that name sounds familiar. You know what I mean? The gill strap forced Mr. Johnson to put makeup on his face to attend the hearing. Defendants Bowman, Kawua, and Rangel when Mr. Johnson entered the hearing room. So they made him put makeup on. So basically, what they were doing, they were making him go in there, and say, hey, go on there and put this makeup on, go in there and play that role. So when he went in there looking like a sissy, with makeup on, let me see what the officer Rangel laughed diversely and told Mr. Johnson. I mean, that shit's making me laugh. You know what I mean? Because it's like making them. I mean, it's kind of fucked up. You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong. It, I'm laughing, man, because it's kind of like what kind of dude is gonna like here put on some fucking and they don't got no motherfucking makeup in TDC, man. So it must have had to been some fucking M&Ms or some Skittles or some kind of fucking food coloring. You know that shit. I mean, Rangel laughed diversely. I mean, Officer Rangel was having a blast. I'm laughing about this shit because it's kind of like, and Officer Bowman told Mr. Johnson, if you want to be a hoe, you be treated like a hoe and get a man. Defendant Rangel remarked, preferably a black one, since it's the bloods you're having problems with. You ain't, and the defendant, Kawua, that's probably another officer. You ain't nothing but a dirty tramp and learn to fight or accept the fucking. So the guards are telling him, calling him a dirty tramp and, go learn how to fight or go out there and accept it. The officer, Kawuva, concluded the hearing by insisting that the record reflect that Mr. Johnson was wearing makeup. She then stated, Miss Pretty is going to a good place now. The defendant had Mr. Johnson transferred from building 18 to building 7, the most heavily gang infested building at Alred. So they moved him from the so-called most non-violent door. So they moved him to building 7, the most gang infested block at the Alred unit. Upon information, disbelief, defendants Bowman, Kawun, and Rangel knew of the severe gang problem in Building 7 and the substantial risk that serious harm will fall upon Johnson at Building 7. So they knew, why would they put him over there? During his first week on Building 7, a member of the Crips gang forced Mr. Johnson to perform oral sex on him. The Tangos gang objected to this disrespect of their property and demanded $60 in commissary payment from the Crips. Thereafter, members of the Mexican mafia, that's why I'm saying, man, that this tango, it must have been the Sananto tangos. The reason I'm saying it's the Sananto tangos is because if there's thereafter members of the Mexican mafia, the most powerful gang on the building 7, you know, if they approached Mr. Johnson and told him that he must ride or die, meaning that only accepting sexual slavery with the gang would avoid him being killed, you know. So if there's documentation saying that the Mexican mafia, they're the ones that were doing this to this dude, that they went up to him and told him, hey, you're gonna ride or die, meaning the only but I think it was more of the esquina firmes or the tango. You know what I mean? The Sananto tango. Because these guys were the last one. They were still tied in to them. Just because of really a family ties majority of the time. Their family ties kept them aligned to the Mexican mafia. Uncles, nephews, brothers, brother-in-laws, cousins, stuff like that. So this guy, they actually told him, "Hey, you're gonna ride or die." You know what I mean? One of the two. So basically, he's basically starting a riot. A full-fledged gang or organization war over this guy. You know, gangs are, they're about to go to war for this guy, for Coco. The gangs began fighting over who owned Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson was told that he must attend a gang meeting in the recreation yard where he would be forced to choose which gang would own him. So they were amazed. They said, "Hey, you going out to rec yard?" Excuse me. And we're gonna figure this shit out. You know, we're gonna figure out whose boy you belong to. We're tired of of all this disrespect. You know, we done told y'all he belongs to us. You know, if you ain't gonna pay the $60 that we're charging you for you to play with them, then you ain't gonna touch him. We're about to go to war. Hey, that's what it seems like. And I'm gonna have to ask. Now that Coco's in the picture, I wanna ask him how true, how truth is all this. Was he really starting riots against blacks and Hispanics? So that is that really a saying that, hey, them punks will start riots. You know, is this one of those examples that he was about to start prison riots over Coco, over that over that boy pussy, as they say it? Bodies were gonna start dropping. Is that serious? But then you got people like Flea saying it was more important than water, the most element that you need to survive on this planet. I think we're made of what, 85, or I don't know how much percentage of water we're made of, but it's one of the most important elements that we need to survive. And you heard Flea said it's more important than water. And then you got these guys over here about to start dropping bodies over old Coco. You know, they said no, they want the max. And I guess at that time, the max was $60 commissary. And then they bumped it up to 75. Oh man. He's about to I want to know what happened. Did he go out to the rec yard? Sh- December 30th, 2001. He filed another step one grievance requesting safekeeping. He informed staff that day he intended to break the disciplinary orders in order to get segregation and escape the gangs. So the next day after he wrote that grievance, Johnson intentionally occurred a major case violation in an effort to avoid the choice between death and continual sexual slavery. He went to the recreation yard, were not allowed to do so, and intentionally gave an incorrect answer when the correction officer asked him for his room number. So, in order not to go to the rec, he gave the guard a different number and try to get an out of place case. So Captain he told him he was being a forced slavery. He said he caught himself the case, to get out of that situation. The captain laughed at him and told him, "Hey man, I'm gonna strip you of everything, and I'm gonna give you the maximum punishment available. He gave him the max. He gave him 45, 45, 45, 45 rec, 45 commissary, and all his property for 45 days. His classification dropped to a line 3, messed up his release date. On the 7th, he goes on January 17th, 2002. He goes for the 7th endangerment claim. 7th. And the same committee told him that Johnson probably consented to the sex acts because he personally believed you liked dick all the time. The committee laughed at Norbert Thomas. You like this shit. I'm convinced you are with this gang. I don't think you need no safekeeping. You need to be placed on high security where you don't have anything to do but one celly, and then you can get fucked all the time. God, these guys should be on immediate custody and a general population that he should just learn to fight, to learn how to fuck or just fight. To Johnson started sobbing, screaming, and pleading with the defendants not to send him back to general population. They laughed. They grabbed Mr. Johnson and dragged him out while he was kicking and screaming for help. The next day, they gave him a written denial for safekeeping. Once again, he writes another grievance, January 2002, for uh, for safekeeping. No evidence. Once they released him from a solitary confinement and placed him on special state restraint, and Building 8, Black and Hispanic gangs on the unit fought over him. So damn, he was really starting wars with the blacks and Hispanics, man. They really wanted this dude. Each claimed he was their property. Mr. Johnson received several threatening members addressing him as Coco. Some of the letters threatening physical and sexual violence. Others warned him that he had been pegged as a snitch and might as well do as you're told. One letter offered to buy him. Desperate to get help, he was off cell restriction and back in general population. He began writing the ACLU and other outside organizations asking for help. In 2002, his grandmother sent a life endangerment claim to the TD and found no support for it. February 22, 2002, they put him back in population Building 8. That night, gang members assaulted Mr. Johnson and forced him to perform sex acts with other inmates. The attacks continued the next day, and despite Mr. Johnson did not report either attack. And so they were having full-fledged orgies with this guy, man. On February 22, the Mexican Mafia claimed definitive ownership of Mr. Johnson the same day. The gang sold him to another inmate who forced him to perform oral sex. While the Mexican Mafia owned Mr. Johnson, the sexual assaults and exploitation escalated dramatically. They sold him to scores of other inmates. Gang leaders in Building 8 negotiated with gang leaders in Building 7 for a fee of $5 to $10 in commissary for Coco sexual services. Gang leaders controlled his life and his body. They told him to whom he had been sold and what must he do for that inmate. They told him that if he refused, he would be beaten or unalived. A sexual slave. He was reportedly penetrated anally and forced to perform orally at the command of gang members. On around February 27, 2002, another Mexican gang bought Mr. Johnson sexual favors for a week. He was forced to perform sex acts on 8 inmates in the stairwell, in the shower, and in his cell. On March 2002, a white inmate called MJ came to Mr. Johnson's cell and told him, "Say, I already done paid them guys. I don't want to fuck you. I just want you to give me oral." While MJ was demanding, you know, favors from Johnson, Sergeant Thomas discovered MJ in Johnson's cell and took MJ to his assigned cell. Sergeant Thomas told me, "I don't care how you make your money, but I'm not tolerating prostitution on this car. And tell your pimp he better comply." Sergeant Thomas did not issue a disciplinary report against MJ. MJ came back to Mr. Johnson's to finish up on Monday. So that guy went, they caught him out of place. You know, the sergeant didn't write him up, but then the white guy still went back the next day to finish up on 100. On March 13th, 2002, on around 12:30, an officer unlocked the door to Mr. Johnson's cell, allowing inmate JD to enter. JD told Mr. Johnson, "Some Mexican on 7 building sent me over. You know what it is." When Mr. Johnson balked at his request, JD and Mr. Johnson said that they had already paid for Mr. Johnson's services. JD forced Mr. Johnson to perform oral on him. On about March 15th, 2002, a white gang leader masturbated on Mr. Johnson in the shower. The showers were uncompleted, unguarded. Immediately assigned by compliance from time to time was returned from service to population. Inmate gang members masturbated on him in the shower a minimum of 30 times. He could not take a shower without other inmates, you know, gunning him down. On March 17th, a Mexican mafia inmate called Monster approached Mr. Johnson in the day room and told him that he must go to the showers. When Mr. Johnson arrived, 8 other inmates were in the shower. Gang members also forced a mentally ill inmate named Alazar to the showers. The gang members then surrounded Mr. Johnson and Alazar and reportedly forced Alazar to stick his finger in Mr. Johnson's anus and lick it. Gang members then forced Alazar and Johnson to simultaneously jerk each other off. Like, what the fuck are these guys doing, man? Like, they're in there watching two dudes jerk each other off. Man, I don't know, man. This is the more you read it, shit, the more the shit gets sickening, man. Like, what the fuck? Despite the multitude of horrors he already experienced in the already surrealistic nightmare nature of the story, the gang members tried to force him to perform oral and anal sex with Alazar, but he refused. He was only spared the further degradation because the other men relented when called to a meal. So it was, hey, there was, I guess there was time to eat the spread. You know, so however, gang members pushed Mr. Johnson down the back stairwell as punishment for refusing to comply with the gang's order. So they told him go in there, uh, and they threw him down the stairs, for not listening. So immediately after that, Alazar ran to the Lieutenant Paul in the day room and asked for help. Alazar was hysterical, but the guard uh, refused to help him and ordered him to go away. Alazar then tackled the lieutenant and was hauled away on the disciplinary charge. When Mr. Jaw saw the defendant after the meal, the lieutenant told him that he better not act like Alazar or he would be carried off in the unit body bag. On March, Johnson returned from church to find another white inmate in his cell, named Kevin, told Mr. Johnson that he already paid for his service. I don't want to lose any money. I don't want to lose my money. Kevin then forced Mr. Johnson to perform oral on him. On March 27, 2002, interrupted an attorney-client from the National Prison. There was no concrete evidence to support his life and danger claim that he had been stabbed or gutted. Since he had not been stabbed or gutted, that same day, Mr. Fowler, he fired. So no safekeeping again, to have his ass kicked at the same meeting. Don't tell me how to run my classification. He was coerced into sex, finally defended. Right now we're recommending transfer, and you're going to a good friend of ours on another unit. So they put him on safekeeping finally. They moved him to the Michael unit and placed this at safekeeping. So after all that, you know, about a whole year of being sold to different, whoa, fuck. He talk about AIDS, be a troublemaker, and give Mike unit. He Fox will make sure jump plea close custody. His grievances because he was sexually assaulted hundreds of times at the Aldrich. Because he was hundreds of times at the outbreak without any kind of protection. He believed that he might have had HIV or hepatitis. That the administration never gave him any kind of treatment, any kind of test. He says 100 of them. 100 of them. Do y'all believe that? From different organizations. Sold. You read the document. You said I mean, we just went through the whole civil suit. He named organizations. He named people. Uh Man, if that's not a good story, we've all heard that these punks, these sissies can start riots. It's kind of crazy, that the boys, you know, it's wild, man. You read these kind of documents and you're like, man, somebody went through this type of stuff, you know, being forced to put makeup on, you know, guys just pulling up like how can you, you know, actually being sold, like fuck, I'm kind of speechless for words because I don't know how the dude could live like that. What kind of you know, he must a strong willed person, to be able to go through that all that day and not retaliate. He said it says right there hundreds of times he was abused. Hundreds, hundreds. That's a lot of time. That's you know, you know, it's sad, tragic story, Uh and that's why I reached out to him. He said he's interested in telling his story. He wants to tell his story. He's interested as you can see the documentation right there, man, he got a lot of stories, and I don't know, once I get everything situated, I think I'll probably have him call in, and do the videos that way, that way I can hear from him. And I'll ask him certain questions, and we'll go from there. Hopefully y'all like this one. The This is the story of Roderick Keith Johnson, also known as Coco. He's going to be on here telling his stories, and I guess he's going to be a valid source for Texas incarceration. He got valid stories. He's open. He's not going to hold back. He's not in the gangs, so he doesn't have to watch what he says. He can be as open as possible, and as you can see in that documentation, he was open. Because it seems like everybody was getting a piece of him, black, white, Mexican, you know, everybody. It doesn't that sexual doesn't affect one race; it affects everybody. You know, and hopefully, he can give us a better insight on that culture. Uh, Thank you everybody for tuning in. Hopefully, I like it. Tomorrow, depending on how I feel, I'll probably do another video. If not, we'll go from there. Y'all have a good one. Let me see my phone.